welcome to another episode of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I am your host, Carl Campagna. Many people believe that education can be the silver bullet or the linchpin that can help solve problems like homelessness, drug addiction, social division, and income inequality. And in Hawaii, of all places where our many intertwined cultures all cherish our keiki and do all we can to open doors for their successes, would we not assume that a high priority is placed on having a world-class educational system? On this show, we talk about the programs available to our keiki, the quality of our facilities and infrastructure, addressing deferred maintenance, increasing the number of cool rooms for our keiki and teachers, a more comprehensive curriculum approach, as well as appropriately recognizing and valuing our teachers and administrative staff. And perhaps more importantly, what life and career opportunities are we providing for our keiki to thrive today and tomorrow? We live in a time of change, of mass and immediate communication, of evolving economic landscapes, which require foresight, integrity, and a greater quality of education for our keiki. To address these concerns, we need our leaders to be forward-thinking and accessible, ethical and compassionate, sincere and open-minded, willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work for the public interest, the common good, and the brightest possible future for our keiki. Today we have a very special guest, a former Hawaii State Legislator who received her bachelor's degree in linguistics from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., her master's of education degrees in curriculum and instruction, and educational administration from the University of Hawaii in Manoa here in Honolulu, as well as the American University in Washington, D.C., respectively. She earned her PhD in education from the Union Institute in Cincinnati, Ohio. She's also received numerous awards for her community service and has recently authored a book entitled Leaving the Gilded Cage. It is my deep honor to introduce Ms. Lyla Berg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl. I'm pleased and honored and excited to be here to have
Excellent.
a conversation with you.
Yeah, as am I. First of all, let me say happy belated International Women's Day.
Thank you.
You are quite the example of why we recognize women, why we need to recognize women more.
There are a lot of foremothers.
Yes.
From whom I learned and listened and spoke with, so there's a lot of modeling that I had.
And from that, as we all should do, we stand on the shoulders of those before us so that we can provide example for those ahead of us, and then hopefully we take it from there. So that's what I always think about. I look forward to seeing what my kids are able to accomplish based on the fact that, well, you know, their shoulders include mass media. Their shoulders include computers and the internet and the ability to have so much at their fingertips in a way that was not so when I was in school. So to see what they're going to be able to accomplish is something that I find is amazing and interesting. So okay, let me ask you this. Your book, Leaving the Gilded Cage.
Yes, and by the way, I have a copy here that I'd like to give you.
Oh.
That I will present to you afterward. Yeah, you know, having been in the legislature and having been a principal and a lot of the kids voting program that I started, the presumption is that this book is telling a lot of secrets and divulging, you know, what those cages are. And it's a non-fiction stories and stories of people actually on how they've surrendered into their lives and conquered the tragedies and the challenges so that they can become more authentic and more themselves. And as an educator, that was always the goal for me. You know, if we look at what the root word education is, which is educare, it is to draw forth from within. And so when I first started teaching, it was always with the philosophy that children come to me, young people come to me, adults even in my company, come to me with so much already. So many rich experiences, even our kindergartners or our preschoolers. And how do we use that, or how do we enable them to build on their strengths, to be who they are most happy to be, not who we want them to be?
So it's like they're a puzzle or there's a lock, and you're just trying to unlock them a little bit and provide what is within them to really come out and start to shine more.
And actually, You know, it's the cage we have. It's not even locked. The cage has bars. So we can see what's on the outside, what's available to us. And yet and I call it the Gilded Cage because it looks like it's perfect. You know, we live in Hawaii, we have the most beautiful weather, the loveliest people, great food, things work, and yet we have homelessness, and we have dropouts, and teen pregnancies, and drug issues. Someone might say, well, that's just human nature, it's common. It is, and what can we do about it?
Yes,
and not just
accept
that where I live in my community, we're safe, and we have sidewalks. And I remember when I was in the legislature, and I represented East Oahu, so that's from Hawaii Kai to Kaimuki. My colleagues would joke and they'd say, well, you live in Camelot. What do you know about whatever the issues are?
Therefore, the cage is even more gilded.
Exactly,
Yes.
Exactly. And it's an illusion.
Yes.
It's an illusion.
It is an illusion, because first of all, it can all be stripped away. My wife and I are licensed foster parents, and we have seen kids from multiple backgrounds that have had the world and then nothing in one fell swoop. And to see what they go through and how they adapt and how their reality, their scope of how they see themselves and how they see the world is shaped by those experiences, with all of us, they are. But it's the crushing thing. It's that piece of us that breaks our heart when we see that they have accepted less for themselves.
Well, and maybe there's a way to reframe that, you know, that their resiliency, because that's really what this book is about, stories of resiliency. How do we bounce back in a way, because resiliency is natural for all of us, but how do we bounce back to where we are in a way that is more creative, more empowered, more stronger? And I think, and with all due respect to your comment of feeling badly for these children who have not had the perfect childhood, who's had the perfect childhood?
That's a good point.
I mean, really, some of us have suffered in different ways, you know, or have been challenged in different ways. I think if we come from the perspective that the glass is always full, always, and our children are, and all of us are full, how now can we be fuller? And fuller means sometimes we have to release these things that keep us from feeling full, feeling authentic, feeling empowered.
There is a truth in that, and yes, I agree. I think that your comment is the absolute next step from my comment. So I appreciate that, because it's true. The resiliency I see in my son, let alone any of the other children that have come through our house. But it's that resiliency that enables us to adapt to what those conditions are, or adapt to where they've been and now where they're going. So the key to that is, how are they getting there? Who maybe is there to help guide them and lead them? I've always felt, my wife and I have done the best we can to help guide our kids, help guide our children, but at the same time remember to get out of their way. We can show them, look, there's opportunity for you. Oh, you're interested in that? Okay, great. Let's take that to the next level. And then the level beyond that. Now let's see what you do with it. And then I'm going to step back, and I'm going to let you go experience that, whether you succeed or fail. Either way, you're going to learn from it, and it's going to be a good thing. I just need to get out of your way and not have it be my agenda, but help them create their own.
Yeah, and I think that's our role as adults. It's our role as educators. You know, there was a famous coach, I don't know if it was John Wooden or one of the other coaches, who said that leadership is about leading, following, or getting out of the way.
There you go, yes.
And out of the way does not mean washing our hands and just letting the kids do whatever. Right. It is standing outside and letting them find the way or a way, and then helping them process, helping them adjust to the fact that maybe their way was an incomplete success.
Correct, and that there was more opportunity.
Yes.
A lot of times I've seen many kids in many scenarios where they believe that they have a limit. They believe that, well, all I'm going to be able to achieve in this life is I'm going to be a mother. Well, first of all, that's an amazing thing. Don't minimize that. Second of all, why are you saying that is your limit? Why can you not achieve more? And one of the things I reiterate to my kids and to whomever else will listen is There are going to be so many people in this world who will try to put limitations on you. Why should you be one of them? Open yourself up. Let yourself go. You know what, your opportunity, you're interested in this, how about you take it to another level? How about you see those possibilities? If you want to run your own business, this is what it takes. If you want to become a lawyer, this is what it takes. How about we go talk with the director or the chair of the legal department at UH, and if we have that opportunity, to hear what they have to say, to get that advice.
So let's go back to why young people limit themselves.
Okay, good, yes.
Because when a child is born, there are no limits.
Right.
The child generally comes in and says, wow, this is a cool place, or this is a scary place, what am I going to do with this? And for the most part, children spend the majority of their time in a place called school.
Yes.
Whether it's public, private, charter, whatever. It is a location, an institution that has been formed to form them.
Yes.
And, I'm a public school advocate. My whole career has been in the public school. I understand the purpose of schools being to prepare our young people to be citizens. Citizens have to read and write because we have a form of self-governance. They have to vote.
Yes.
Citizens have to think and follow laws if they're going to be a good citizen. They have to be gainfully employed and have savings accounts and bank accounts. It's not like financial intelligence or financial knowledge is a new body of, as a new discipline in schools. And so if we remember what schools are for, or what institutions of learning are for, they're institutions of learning.
Yes.
And we tend to get stuck in the components because we forget to ask different questions. We're asking, how do we get that young person to get that information?
Yes, that's excellent. I think we have to go take a quick break.
Okay.
And that's actually a good place because we can jump into that conversation in this next segment. So thank you so much, appreciate that. So again, this is Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm Carl Campagna with our amazing guest today, Ms. Lyla Berg. We'll see you in a minute, thanks.
Okay, this is Think Tech Hawaii, and it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Energy Wednesday here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. Come and listen to us. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to ask Sharon to tell us more.
Come and see us every Wednesday, as Jay said. And we have people like Jim Albers from HECO here and co-host Ray Starling here every Wednesday. We not only go on Olelo and OC16, but also stream live. So please come visit us, hear about the latest in clean energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here. You got any comment on all this?
As important as energy is in all of our lives today, this is a great forum and a great format to vet those issues. So I encourage everybody to listen in and participate.
Okay, Ray, what do you think for a close?
Well, I think this is the greatest show in the energy world here in Hawaii. You can come here every week, 1 hour, and catch the latest on what's happening and hear from the people who really know what's going on. Like Jim Alberts, we appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
Ray Starling, Sharon Moriwaki, Jim Alberts, and Jay Fidel here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at Think Tech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech. Wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii's Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Education, obviously, is the topic that we're talking about today. Once again, our guest is Miss Lyla Berg. Before we went to break, we were talking about questions that we're asking our children and what we're asking of our children, perhaps. So let's jump back into that. Once again, welcome to the show, and welcome back, everybody. So you were saying, are we asking the right questions?
Are we asking the right questions of our system and also of ourselves?
Of ourselves, yes. Okay.
So when I was in the legislature as the vice chair of education, many people would come and offer bills to improve the system. And I would ask the question, not how much it would cost, but what you're suggesting is for the purpose of what? And the legislature tends to be component-driven and time-driven.
Yes.
And so what I guess I would like to suggest is that the community, parents, schools, administrators need to be asking the questions and coming forward with the vision of what they want. The legislature's responsibility is to fund it and not to be convinced that one or two things are really important, because everything is important.
Okay.
So the questions actually that need to be asked at this time, especially because the Department of Education in Hawaii and nationally have three goals: to prepare young people for college, if that's an option, to prepare our students for a world of work, if that's an option right after school or in the near future, and also to prepare our young people to be citizens. Not just civic responsibility, but to become citizens.
To be productive members.
Yes, and there again, what does that mean?
Yes.
And I am obsessed with civic education, as you probably have guessed by now. And that is obsession really leads me to asking different questions. Civic mindedness is also about altruism. It's also about participating in the community, not just monetarily, although philanthropy is really important, but how can we identify, how can all of us identify what needs to change in the community so for the good of all, it's healthier, it's safer, it's more enjoyable.
I think the problem we get there is you're talking about public interest. Public interest is a high-minded idea. It is an altruistic idea. If we say, and I make reference to public interest and common good, okay, that's high-minded, altruistic idealism. Then you get into the reality of agendas and interests in this interest or private interest, a public interest versus a private interest. And how do we, and that's, the legislature can play a role in understanding that a little bit, but is the legislature really in position to do that? Based on, well, today's economics and today's political economics, and certainly, what can they do? If their campaigns are funded by this entity and that entity, can they really do something that might be against them? And that impedes that process, that impedes that ability to achieve a level of altruism that we would hope that many people assume is there, but that's where the corruption idea begins. That's when people begin to distrust their government.
I think we have to keep it more simple than that.
Okay.
The legislature is people.
Yes.
Of people who have been elected by people.
Yes.
And people grow up in a school system.
Yes.
They grow up with wonderful parents, as your children are blessed to have, as hopefully my son feels as well, because we coach them and we ask questions and we hold them accountable and responsible for their choices. Not every young person has that adult guidance. So in a school day, 8 to 10 hours is where the children reside.
Yes.
What happens in that place is really important, that influences what they believe, how they behave, how they act. So even the conversation of public good, how can children understand the responsibility or the opportunity they have to engage in a community if in the school they sit at desks by themselves, they're told not to talk to their neighbor, they have to pass the test so that they are better than somebody else, not help somebody else, And there have been educators and real free thinkers, John Dewey as an example, who have always tried to influence the education system from the perspective of creating community. Student team learning, collaborative learning, there's always some new word out there.
Sure.
But basically, again, coming back to the question is, what is the purpose of schools? It is individual learning because we are responsible for ourselves, but in our form of democracy, in our form of self-governance, it requires dialogue. It requires working together.
Yes.
Businesses now, this whole, I'm amused, I'm on several boards on the national level. And so the whole notion of 21st century skills, collaborative teamwork, creativity, and innovation, and I don't mean to be facetious, but at the same time, these are not new. Society has relied upon these skills.
We've rediscovered the wheel, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and peace is not, there's no magic to peace.
Yeah.
There's a little wizardry that's
Sure.
involved.
Sure.
So if we go back again to the purpose of schools and what happens in the classroom, even with facilities, it's not enough to have an air conditioner, especially now because the schools are responsible for the electricity rate
Right.
costs
Right.
above a certain baseline.
Right.
So there's so many complicated pieces to this, but really I think the question is, what is in the best interest of a young person's learning?
Yes. And therefore, yes, whether it's an air conditioner in the room is in their best interest because not for the teacher and for the kids, fine.
So they can think.
But go back to what you're saying there a little bit. What's going on in the classroom. And yes, aside from parents, our teachers are some of the most important people in our children's lives because they spend more time with them in a day-to-day basis than frankly they do with their parents.
And importance means influential.
Exactly, influential. So what we have today are challenges to our teachers. We have a number of people who think, well, the teachers are not good. They need to be measured in a different way, or they want a raise, they don't deserve a raise. They raise the kids' scores. Well, I use the fishing analogy. People who have watched the show have heard me say it before. You cannot just, this goes to the Common Core, and I want to get your thought on Common Core versus a more comprehensive approach and how that is. The belief is that we're teaching the kids, or the concept is we're teaching the kids how to take the test, how to pass the test. We're giving them the answers to this test they're going to take shortly. So therefore they will score better on this test, and therefore their scores are going up, so therefore the teachers are doing a good job. Even though this subject matter isn't necessarily in this teacher's wheelhouse. This isn't what they went to school for. That's not their area of specialty. But they're teaching it, and well, now here's this class, I just pulled it off the internet, here's this next test. Thank you so much. Oh, they passed it, good. I'm doing great, right? Well, again, you can give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day, or you can teach them how to fish. If we're giving them the answers to the tests, if we're teaching them the test, we're giving them a fish. We're not teaching them how to problem solve. We're not teaching them how to be collaborative. We're not teaching them how to think in a way that is preparing them best for the future that is on the way. And that's one of my biggest concerns that I look at for my kids. I'm lucky that my son goes to Kamehameha schools, and what they do there is extraordinary compared to many others. My 8-year-old daughter goes to Mai, a very good school, but then where does she go after that? And in Hawaii and in many states, we have to worry about that. Where are they going? Who are those teachers? Who are the principals? Who's administering what programs at this school? And as a community, as a parent, we ask those questions and we're concerned about those questions. Is there a way for that communication to happen? Is it through the legislature? Is it through the DOE? Is it through the parent-teacher organizations? What is the best way for the community and for the parents to express these concerns and be able to have these conversations to make sure that the standards are being raised? So if we agree with Common Core, great. If we don't agree with Common Core, then you know what? We need to make a change. So how do we do that?
You've talked about a number of different items.
Yes.
And again, I go back to we have to ask different questions. It's not whether Common Core or holistic learning is the answer. The questions have to be really, what do we want in our young people, not for our young people. The fact that there's no more music in schools or art, I mean, it makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Because science and research shows that when foreign languages are taught, right, when music happens, the brain works in a different way. There's more synthesis and the synapses work, and you know, I'm not a scientist, so I can't specify all those differences, but we know this for true. So if schools are to, and I refer back to Act 51. Act 51 came into existence in 2004, before I got elected. And Act 51, the preamble says that the purpose of education is no less than the endowment of human culture, such that every successive generation is endowed with the ability to address sustainability, peace, and their well-being, something along those lines.
Okay.
But really the point is that the purpose of education is the endowment of human culture. That's huge. And it means...
That is huge. That actually changes. Earlier you were saying if you go to the root core, the root word of education, it's taking from within and bringing out.
Yes.
As opposed to the enculturation process, which is what we all go through. So there's a division, there's a difference.
Yes, and looking at a child as an empty vessel and I'm going to pour it into you.
Yes.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
Because maybe your vessel has more of other things than my vessel.
Or it's shaped differently.
It's absolutely shaped differently
Yes.
because of all of our life experiences and our soul's journey as well.
Yes.
So if we look at that big endowment of human culture, what does that mean? Okay,
Yeah, those are some
how
big
do we
words there.
then how do we then create young people, adults, human beings that will perpetuate a culture that we're comfortable and safe in, that is progressive? Life is going to go on. There will be more technology in the next few years, and we've all read that the jobs that your grandchildren, my grandchildren are going to have not even been created yet.
Haven't been invented yet, yeah.
So what if the purpose of education is to foster the ability to learn, the ability to think and process? And now mathematics teachers, I'm a linguist, right? Mathematics teachers will say, yeah, more math, that helps them to think. Well, when I was taking my son's bed apart because the telephone man needed to get behind the bed, it's a Danish bed, so it has all these little pieces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I should have measured and I should have, taken stock of what board went where, and I didn't. So it took me like another 2 hours to put it back again.
Sure.
When I texted my son and I said, I should have taken more math. He said to me, math wouldn't have helped, Mom. Think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a little vignette, and with all due respect to mathematical skills,
Mm-hmm.
that is not one of my intelligences. Howard Gardner said there's 7 intelligences.
7. There are 7
7.
intelligences. Okay.
Mathematical and linguistic, which is what the SAT scores and what we focus
Sure.
on schools. There's spatial intelligence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I Noah Thompson, you put him in the middle of the ocean, he knows exactly where he is and how to
Exactly.
get home.
Mm-hmm.
There's musical intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
There's also interpersonal, the
Absolutely,
ability to
yes.
reflect, intrapersonal,
Okay, yes.
and there's one more, which I'm not sure of at the moment, but there's at least 6 that I can speak about,
Okay.
So looking at the ways in which, not only ways in which learn, because there's different ways we learn.
Yes.
Some people learn visually, some auditorily, some
Manually.
kinesthetically.
Yes, yes.
So we look at ways people learn. We look at the different intelligences. If you look at the different ways that people communicate, some are a little bit more
Yes.
introverted, more extroverted. There's a whole combination, and in every human being, it's very difficult to consider 20 or 30 of these individuals in a classroom and control them.
And control them and have them learn at the same pace, have them learn have them hear the words the same way, for that matter.
So schools are for the convenience and the control of the adults, not for the benefit of children.
Not for the benefit
What
of
is
children.
relevant in schools? Kids want to know, who am I? How do I fit in this world, and what is this world? And
Yeah.
when they look at the adult world, the young people I talk to, they don't want to be us. They don't want to be adults. They want out of school
Yes.
because many of them feel it doesn't honor who they are, and they feel belittled
It's
or
confining,
not
it's
enough.
belittling,
It's
it's-
confining.
yes.
But they don't want to be us yet, because we complain about being sick and traffic and not enough money, and we're not happy.
And yeah, this job and that boss and
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a bridge somewhere that's missing. How do we, how do we prepare young people for the realities of the world?
so yes. So how do we prepare our kids? How do we, what we were talking earlier? How do we position ourselves as champions of our children, champions of the cause of their education? How do we look at it from the perspective of their best interests? So that's what you're saying. That's where you're suggesting we need to ask the questions from that perspective.
And then how do we facilitate that learning? Not teaching tends to be putting into.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you
Yes.
what's wrong. I'm going to tell you what you should know.
As opposed to drawing out.
This is what I'd like you to learn.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that? How are you going to get that? And how are
Yeah,
you going to
yeah, yeah.
show me? These are some options. And so I think part of the challenge in education, again, because it is about control and getting the most people to do the most stuff, how do we, in different communities, because every community is different,
Yeah.
how do we enable the ingenuity of the community and the engagement of the community for the well-being of the child? The challenge in Hawaii is we have one school system, and it was created years and years ago before the 70s. Actually, education used to be run by the counties,
Okay. Not the state. It was
not the
county run.
state.
Okay.
But because of the parity, not equality, parity in monetary distribution, making sure that there was some common learnings that were going on, it became part of the state responsibility.
Okay.
And so with that state responsibility then becomes control. And the easiest way to control is to tell people what to do.
What to do. Well, and that's what as I've had conversations with other educators or other people interested in the subject matter, that again comes to the question of, well, everybody wants their kids to go to the private school. Well, why? I've asked that question. Why? What's the difference? Are the teachers better? Well, sometimes they can be, but what it came down to was, yeah, sometimes there's more money, so there's more programs for this. They have laptops. They don't have laptops. Whatever those are, the biggest difference that I've heard, aside from things, the biggest difference that I've heard is the teachers have more control. The teachers have the ability to be more creative.
So control meaning freedom?
More freedom, I think. Yes, that's a better word. The teachers have more freedom in a private school to teach in a comprehensive way, in an individual way. This child needs this child needs that. So they can approach a lesson in a way that public school teachers are not given the authority to or the freedom to. Is that something you can agree with, or is there what is to that?
Well, again, there's lots of pieces to this.
Yeah.
I think for me as a teacher advocate as well, and that was my PhD, actually was in adult learning and teacher preparation. The teaching profession is a profession. It's not a job. And if we regarded those people in the profession as professionals,
Yes.
then we would hold them accountable
Yes.
to a dress code. If you go to a bank, you're not going to see somebody in spaghetti straps.
No.
So with all due respect to the teachers and their freedom and wearing shorts and tank tops, I have an issue personally as a former principal. But it is a profession, and if the professionals feel professional, they should be paid as professionals,
Yes.
given in-service training, and that's usually the first thing that's cut. So if we look at the adults in the profession of education, it changes also how we treat them, and therefore how they treat or how they respond to the young people.
So that goes back again to your thought of, are we asking the right questions? Are we asking the right questions of the system with regards to the teachers? When we hear people talk about, oh, the teachers want to raise again, the kids are failing, why do they need a raise? Well, is it about the money? Sometimes it is, but it's about that respect. It's about saying, you know what, this is a profession. Do we want our doctor? Do we want our physician to be an A student? And do we want our physician to specialize in ears and noses, but have them work on our toes if they don't actually know anything about that? And but that, how?
I want my car mechanic to understand mathematics. I want my plumber. My plumber made more than I did in the legislature.
Well,
And what would we do with our
Yes,
plumbers
yes.
and our electricians? Because they keep us alive, really, you know, and keep our houses clean. Your question back again with public and private education. I think in Hawaii in particular, we have a cellular level, a memory that public schools were created for the masses, for the have-nots. If we go back, way back to Punahou in the 1840s, Damien School, Sacred Hearts, all the private schools, Catholic schools, even Kamehameha, they were created for the children of those people who had money and those people from the continent who did not want their children going away.
Right.
So when the Queen started public school in the English standard schools, it was so that her people, our people, the community people, could become gainfully employed, could start businesses, could, if not stand shoulder to shoulder, certainly would feel that they had more to offer the community.
So again, it's a socioeconomic conversation there.
That's how it started, yes. And then there became, again, a cellular memory of the haves and have-nots, what's better, what's worse. Roosevelt High School, McKinley High School were English standard schools. McKinley at one time had a stellar democracy kind of program in their school. Miles Carey, who was the principal at the time, had a student advisory board. I mean, McKinley was the home of many of our first politicians, first Congress people.
That actually, I immediately have a question about that. It's like, okay, so McKinley had the opportunity because of that principal. That principal had an idea, and that principal had the authority to create this. Every other principal, I would imagine, also has that same authority. Should there not be, so first of all, you're saying yes, every principal has that authority to do a program based on what they would like to do and how they would like to do it. I've definitely seen that in my elementary school, as far as when Ms. Blaisdell was there last couple of years and how things progressed, and then when Mr. Ueda took over, and just the difference between what he does and how he does it, and then seemingly why, and then what is the product of that versus what was being done. It's like, okay, there's decided differences that you can see, you can feel. So my next question is, okay, so each principal, at the very least, has the authority to do these things. Once something has been determined that, wow, this was very successful and this was a good idea, what are the opportunities to then say, great, we now need to form some sort of parity, I suppose, but to bring that level of quality, or bring that level of opportunity to other schools.
And creativity.
And creativity to other schools.
Which then also leads to the next question of what is the collegiality of the administrative field?
Yes.
I mean, I think when I was a principal at Kailua Intermediate School and also on the island of Molokai, it was a generation of leadership where I was allowed to stumble as the youngest principal in the state. My superintendent never yelled at me. He would talk to me about, why do you think this happened, and what can we do in the future, and now what are we going to do to mitigate whatever the issue was. It was a time when I, as a principal, were given not only authority, I was given expectation to be innovative. What for my community. What I needed on Molokai was very different than what I needed in Kailua.
Yes.
And there are some expectations, of course, and not standards, there are expectations of achievement and excellence in my students. But at that time when I was at Kailua Intermediate, as an example, we had interdisciplinary, which is now the new buzzword, right? Interdisciplinary learning. And we had a track, 1,200 kids, so only 7th and 8th grade, so I only had them, they came from 6 feeder schools. So I only had 2 years to have them come together, work well, and be ready to leave for 2 different high schools.
Wow.
And we had a regular track where they took the courses that were expected, and then we had another track where students could volunteer, their parents would volunteer them or elect to come into a disciplinary, like a planned communities.
Okay.
School within a school, I guess they call it now. And that happened because I was going to lose an English teacher. She was teaching drama as a form of language arts.
Okay.
And the standards came out that we had to do certain things, and I wanted to keep her. And so we created the spaces for her to do language arts through drama. The math classes would design the stages, the set, the music classes would make the music. But there were two options for the schools. And the reason I share this is because we became nationally recognized for a drug-free schools curriculum at that time because we were so innovative. But it wasn't innovative, it was survival at the time.
Survival, to maintain what you saw was effective.
I wanted to keep the teacher.
You wanted to keep the teacher.
Yeah.
So, but what I heard in there was the rules changed. The requirements changed. You were given a different set of constrictions. For now we needed, I saw that you were doing that, but now you must do it this way. So that freedom, once again, for the teachers to do what they were doing and for this one teacher to do this program was removed unless you were creative around it.
I always looked at myself as administrator as the champion for my school, for my parents,
Yes.
for the teachers, and for the children.
And we, as parents, hope that's true of every one of them.
Yes, and so as the champion, right, I took the hit from the top when they said, you're not following the rules. I had to find a way to describe that what I'm doing was following the rules. Because ultimately, what was important was my students and the well-being of, and their learning. And so it was a different time. It was a different time then.
Yeah.
And I think we can return to that, but this is where the community has to get involved with the schools.
Agreed. The community, the parents and the community need to be more involved. It's harder in some communities than others. As we know, some communities are more affluent than others. So therefore, some communities, the parents are working 2-3 jobs. They're not around enough. There isn't enough money for them to donate or participate as much. So therefore, now there's still that socioeconomic difference. So again, to wrap up, and we, unfortunately, we are at an end of the show.
It's part of the cage, getting out of the cage.
Yes, exactly. To wrap up, the gist of the book, the gist of this conversation has been, are we asking the right questions? And some of those questions need to be about what is in the honest best interests of our children and for their opportunity going forward to thrive.
Yes, and what's relevant? The word authenticity is now kind of become a social buzzword.
Exactly, okay. Unfortunately, we do have to end on this, so thank you very much. Once again, I will thank Ms. Lyla Berg for being on the show today. My name is Carl Campagna. I'm the host of Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Let me thank Think Tech Hawaii, the entire crew, everyone involved, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Mahalo.